Okay, everybody, we are going to go ahead and get started. I want to give a big welcome to everybody who could join us today. We're happy that you are here for our next community learning series, which is going to give you a sneak peek of what to expect as a kinesiology student here at UIC. My name is Jo Wagner. I'm one of the academic advisors for the kinesiology program. I'm joined today by Whitney Harris, our other advisor in the program. Now, I'm very excited to introduce this week's guest, Dr. Craig Horswill. He's actually world-renowned for his research. He does a really great job of integrating science with practical application. He knows what it means to be an athlete. He's very humble. He's a very service-minded leader. And here's a fun fact. He's actually one of our nation's best wrestlers. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Craig Horswill. Everybody give him a welcome.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. And thanks, Whitney, for arranging today's seminar. Feel free to ask questions as we go through today, and I'm glad to answer those for you. So I'm going to be talking about this faster, higher, stronger human performance studies for students. And as you know, we have a big commitment to experiential learning for our students, and I do a lot of projects with UIC athletics, have a good relationship with them. So we have plenty of opportunities to get students involved in service testing as well as research. So what I want to do today is define a specific area of kinesiology, that being human performance, and talk a little bit about the factors that influence it. So it exposes you to some of the concepts and ideas that you'll hear in the classes that you take. And then I want to identify some of the hands-on opportunities, tell you a little bit about some of the research I've done. But we have a number of opportunities for experiential learning or the hands-on learning. Besides research, we have internships, community service, but my focus will be primarily on the research part of things. And then I'll give you some ideas on how to get involved if research is of interest to you. And if it's not, that's fine. It's just an exposure to see what's available, and your strengths and your passions may be in a different area. So a lot of opportunities for you. How did I get involved in it? Well, as Joe said, I was a college wrestler at Wisconsin, and then I went on to grad school in Champaign. For my PhD, I was also a head wrestling coach there at Champaign Central. My first job was at Ball State University, where the lead director of the lab did a lot of work in sports physiology and sports nutrition, so that continued on that interest of mine. And then I moved over to Ohio State University in a very different area in pediatrics, but had an opportunity to participate in NCAA-funded research, so still doing work that influenced the college athlete. I then took a job with Gatorade, and I was 16 years, and as you can imagine, that's all about athletics, performance, well-being of the athlete, and so we did a tremendous amount of research there. And then I've taken a lot of all of that experience and brought that with me at UIC and continued on this area of sports physiology and human performance. And so if you define human performance, one way to define it, and you'll find different definitions, but you can think of it as the capacity to accomplish a task efficiently and effectively. So, effectively getting across the finish line and efficiently basically means that you have energy left over. If you have some other challenge to face, you still have the capacity to face that. So efficiency is a lot about conservation of energy, and effectively is about getting the goal accomplished. I think we could say human performance is an aspect of fitness. If you're more fit, typically you may perform better, but they're not exactly the same. And much of human performance starts in the muscle. You see a diagram here showing how the muscle functions. You see protein. Some of you may recognize some of the chemical structures, ATP. Maybe studied that in biology. We have Ca, calcium, so different minerals acting, and very much at the molecular level inside of the muscle, and how the muscle acts to shorten and contract and generate force. We take a look starting at the bottom here, force production within the muscle. The simplest way to measure this, and a very, pure way to measure it, is to take a piece of muscle out of the person. It's called a muscle biopsy, put it in a special chamber, and look at the force that it produces and manipulate different things. How much ATP is there? How much calcium is there? And see the impact. But, that's just within the muscle, and that's not obviously athletic performance. We can measure a whole body or whole muscle in the physiology lab, measure work, which is force times distance, power, the amount of work you do per minute. Those are a little more functional for the entire human. And then we could also measure things like performance, physical performance, how quickly you do the shuttle run, the vertical jump, which are a little more relevant to what's going on in sports. The shuttle run, you accelerate and decelerate going back and forth, similar to what you might do on the basketball court. Ultimately, though, it's about athletic performance, whether the athlete or the team wins, or the team loses, or the athlete loses. But that's very complicated to measure and control everything and really explain. Oftentimes during my Gatorade days, our marketing people wanted us to study, let's say, the Chicago Bears playing the New England Patriots. Well, if it's a rainy day, your research may wash out, literally. Or if the best running back on the Bears gets hurt that day, that really affects the entire team's performance. And those are things that are outside of your control, and that really impacts research. There are a number of other factors as well that influence athletic performance: the psychology, the environment that the players are in, their genes, their health or disease state. It's possible to have a player playing that might be suffering from leukemia, or maybe have type 1 diabetes. They're acutely healthy and fit, but they may have a chronic disease that could influence performance. But the biomechanics or skill level, strategy, rules, the sport nutrition, all are other things that add a lot to the variability and the difficulty in studying athletic performance. So oftentimes we study things like physical performance that feeds into athletic performance, and we can control more things in the lab to study physical performance and determine how these other factors influence it. A lot of my research focuses on the environment, hot, heat stress situations, as well as nutrition, whether the athlete's dehydrated or has enough energy in their body to perform their task. So you'll see some examples of that in a moment here. Why is it relevant? Why is human performance relevant? Well, it could be relevant because of the touch out at the wall, who gets the gold medal, who gets the silver medal among the swimmers. It also have an impact on kids and their performance, and even injuries, whether they can perform better and more fit versus getting a hamstring pull or muscle cramp, or spraining an ankle. For the firefighter, the concern is whether they have the capacity to pull out someone from that burning building and help that person survive as well as themselves. And in terms of people like the military or astronauts, whether they survive the task that they're faced with. And many of you may have heard about our quest, our meaning the human race quest to go to Mars. And we have the technology. We can send a spaceship to get there. But the big question is whether a human can survive in that spaceship for the months, several months, I think it's 2 or 3 months, of travel to get to Mars. They will lose muscle mass in being a weightless environment, and they may not even have the strength to open the door of the capsule once they land. They might not even survive. If you lose too much muscle mass, you won't survive that. So a lot of implications here for human performance and the factors that go into that. I've done a number of different studies. You can see the list here. And like I said, we have a very good relationship with UIC Athletics, so we're doing a lot of interactions with them. I'm going to pull out a few of these just to show you, talk a little bit about. I'm going to also talk about the students that have been involved, because I think that's a big aspect here to kind of, put their faces here with the work they've done. So one of the recent studies that we've been doing, kind of a series of projects, is to look at the effects of exercise training in the athlete on gut bacteria. And gut bacteria, we know more and more, is very important in our health and well-being. I mean, you may have experienced an illness where, the contents of your intestinal tract kind of moved out of your body too quickly and affected how you felt after that. You became dehydrated. But also replacing that bacteria is very important in your health. So kind of an example you may have experienced. Well, all sorts of things will affect the bacteria in your gut. What you eat, even exercise. It's now well known that exercise will affect the types of bacteria you have and how that may interact with your body to keep you well, fit, or to potentially even promote diseases. In this study, or actually series of studies, a grad student of mine, Jared Hampton Marcel, has been taking a look at the gut bacteria in swimmers and how when they change the amount of training they're doing, that may influence the gut bacteria. He recently published a paper. The collaborator, Dr. Rachel Paretsky, is also involved here as his main advisor. And what Jared found was that the types of bacteria become more pro-inflammatory when the swimmers decrease the amount of training they were doing each day, which is not necessarily what you want to happen. You want things that are more anti-inflammatory. And we also found that the body fat and muscle mass didn't change, even though they were dramatically changing the amount of activity level. So something was going on there, maybe even the bacteria involved in promoting or maintaining their muscle mass and body fat. Another study we did with swimmers was done by Yulani Villanueva, who just recently finished her master's degree with us. She started as an undergrad, got into the coordinated nutrition program to get her registered dietitian certification. And in this study, among a number of studies that she participated, we used what's known as a couple heavy water tracers that the swimmer drank, and the swimmer then could live his normal life for 2 weeks, and we could collect a sample before the very beginning, just before we gave him the tracers, and then afterwards. And the rate that these heavy water tracers got moved out of the body tells us how many calories he's burning a day. And in a nutshell, what we found was that this particular swimmer burned about over 6,000 calories per day during this 2-week period. Well, if you look at the typical average U.S. diet, it's probably more like 2,500 calories a day. So he's burning more than twice the calories a day that a normal person would eat in his one day for the amount of work he was doing. Dr. Max Berkelhammer, who's in the Earth Environmental Sciences, helped us analyze the water. We have to take these samples from the swimmer. We get saliva sample or urine sample or blood sample, and then analyze how much of the tracers are left between before and after. Max is an interesting guy. He does a lot with glaciers and with water turnover at the equator, as well as the poles, the North Pole and the South Pole. He goes to Antarctica often for his work. So this was a new venture for him, getting into the human body. I just stop and see if there are any questions at this point. We're going through some of the stuff pretty fast just to give you a quick exposure, but if you have any questions specific to the kind of research, feel free to ask those. Another kind of a sequence of studies we did had to do with rehydration after exercise-induced dehydration. And one of the students you see here did her undergrad with us, Nuli, and then stayed on for a master's degree with Dimitri Simakis. Became got his doctor of physical therapy and now works at the I think Jesse White Veterans Hospital. And we had a number of other students that went on either to medical school or pharmacy or to physical therapy school that were participated in this. Basically, we're interested in how completely athletes can rehydrate using different beverages after a hard training session. So it'd be like the athlete has a morning training session, there's a few hours to recover, and then they go back for the 2-a-day, the second day training in the afternoon. And we wanted to know how, with the different beverages, how well would that athlete be hydrated going into the next practice, the second practice. And so we compared water, Pedialyte, and Gatorade in these different studies that we did, and basically found that the more salt, the beverage with the more salt, that being the Pedialyte, promoted more hydration or rehydration. And both of the products that had some sodium or salt, Pedialyte and Gatorade, did better than water alone. So this was an interesting study, pretty large scale study. The last one we did had 26 athletes that were measured on 3 different occasions, and each occasion lasts almost the entire day. So that was a very long study in terms of number of weeks, months, almost a year to finish it.
Hey, Craig, this is Whitney. I have a question on that last one.
Yeah.
So when you were looking at the different kind of rates of rehydration, did it matter? So looking at like a soccer player and the environment versus like a gymnast who's in a gym, if it is pretty humid in there, you know what I mean? Like, did you all have to factor that in as well, the environment?
So one of the first study we did was just with the cross country team, and we had them run for 13 miles just right behind the PEB building. There was a trail that they did, and I think they ran it. There were like 3 loops that they did, or 5 loops or something, to get 13 miles in, which is about 75 minutes of exercise. And we didn't let them drink anything during it. So it was very similar to what they did. The subsequent studies we did were more along the lines of what happens in soccer, maybe tennis. We didn't have too many gymnasts participate, but primarily soccer players, tennis players, I think maybe a baseball player or two, where there was more stop and go. So we had everybody in the hot gym. Actually, we used the dance studio. We had the ellipticals, the bikes, and the treadmills in there, and we had people at times walk. I mean, it's very fixed protocol. They walked, they then jogged, they then sprinted for a short distance, and they walked again. They did cycles of that on each of those machines, and we rotated them on the different machines. So we really mixed it up to try to make it and simulate as close as possible the types of activity that they did in their training. But yeah, good question on that. So we'll move on to this study, and you can kind of see a theme of hydration in a lot of this. In this one, we're interested in predicting muscle mass. And, you know, the sport of wrestling or combat sports or different types of sports, athletes often have to make a weight class. And sometimes they'll dehydrate, which is not necessarily the right way to lose weight. So what we're doing is trying to come up with better ways to predict what's the ideal weight and try to regulate, communicate to the athlete, here's the best way to decide your weight. And there can be errors because athletes differ a lot. And for example, swimmers' body composition differs more than gymnasts. And it's pretty well known that the swimmers have more water and less mineral in their bones, maybe because of selection, you know, natural selection into that sport, maybe because of the training of that sport. They're in the water, their bones don't develop the same way possibly to help them with their buoyancy. Compared to a gymnast, it's a high impact sport. They have very dense bone mineral content and less water in their body. So the lean body mass differs very much between these. So we recruited some of these athletes, females in particular, measured them different ways. We measured their body density, body water. Again, we used a heavy water tracer, a DEXA, which you see a scan of over on the left, the skeleton of the person, that can give it the bone mineral content. And then we use some field methods, skin folds and BIA, that basically runs a benign current through the body to look at your conductivity, which is based on your body water and lean tissue. And we found that, as we might expect, that these athletes, swimmers and gymnasts, varied a lot in terms of the bone mineral and body water. And if we accounted for those differences, that helps. And if we actually add the skin fold measure and the BIA, the bioelectrical impedance, we improve the reliability of our measurements and help guide the athletes to a safe weight that way. And some of that former athletes, but the students that were participating in this, you see at the top, Brandon Groth, who was a master's degree student with us. He's now a personal trainer, strength coach in the Chicago area. Josue Oliveras, who is currently a master's degree student with us and maybe one TA of some of you next year. He graduated, finished his undergrad with us. And then at the bottom is Doug Foote, who went on and now is working on his PhD at the University of Oregon. The last one here that I will talk about is a little bit of a departure from the usual types of research that I do. This one had to do with active workstations. And you may have heard the expression that sitting is the new smoking. It's sitting for prolonged periods at our desk, whether it's our desk job, whether it's riding the train to work, whether it's sitting watching the TV or playing video games, whatever. Sitting is not necessarily a good thing for us. In fact, there's one research study, large-scale study, showing that after you account for all the other causes of death in a large-scale population, over 200,000 people, after you account for deaths due to heart disease, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, stroke, etc., that 6% of deaths in that group could be attributed to sitting, simply sitting, which is quite amazing. That sitting might promote death even after you account for heart disease, stroke, etc. So there's a lot of initiatives around the standing desk, getting people to stand, work more as they are at their desk, or move. There are treadmill workstations. You can walk at your desk in place or have a little bike. Well, this company developed something known as the sit flow. You see it here. It's a swing under your desk. Put your feet on it and swing. So I've had a number of students, Tess Tyson and Haley Scott, the two women that you see in the middle, Danelle Voorhees, who is a swimmer for UIC and is actually going on to medical school now, and then Hiba Syed, who is way over on the left and recently presented some of this, all participated in this research. And Hiba has just been accepted to physical therapy school and will start in the fall. We're taking a look at calorie burning with this device and even glucose control in people who have type 2 diabetes. And what we found was that the sit flow can actually elevate your metabolic rate by 10 to 18%, and actually did better than standing, which surprised me. I didn't expect that. And it looks like the glucose controls is improved too in those people that have type 2 diabetes and use this, but we still have to complete that study. 10 to 20% elevation in metabolic rate isn't a lot, but when you consider, and that would be, so to put it in a little more user-friendly context, that's about 100 calories a day. So if you sat at your desk for an 8-hour job and used a swing, you'd burn 100 calories. Not much. That's an apple. Allows you to eat an apple. Maybe 2/3 of a Hostess Twinkie. Okay, not a lot. But if you stop and think, and I'm going to ask the group here for a guess, how many extra calories a day would a person have to eat to gain 30 pounds over their adult career span? So you're a 22-year-old, you graduate, you go take the desk job, 30 years later, you're 52, you're 30 pounds heavier. How many extra calories, in other words, excess calories would you have to eat a day to get there? Any guesses from the group here? You can type it in. I've got a couple saying 100 extra calories a day. Anybody else? Any of the students? Someone guessed 100 to 200 calories a day. So again, this is over in excess. Let's say you needed 2,500 calories to eat a day to maintain your weight. It would be in addition to that. So now if I guess a 400, 500. So I'm going to give you the answer. This is going to shock you. 10 extra calories a day, over and above what you need to maintain your weight. 10 extra calories a day over 30 years would cause you to gain 30 pounds. So the hover might actually do something and help you head off that even with only 100 calories burned extra day, it might help. And maybe the real message here might be here. That's an important one in kinesiology is that people benefit from accumulation of small amounts of movement throughout the day. So whether you do formal exercise or you take a break and go to the gym and exercise, or whether you use the stairs rather than using the elevator, whether you walk across campus rather than using the bus, whether you use the sit flow rather than just sitting, you do all these things that promote activity, probably have a cumulative effect of really helping us control weight and as importantly, heading off some of the risk factors that might be associated or might lead to early death, early mortality. So right now, maybe hopefully you're excited, but if you're not, hopefully I can give you the last convincing here. Why do research? Well, it's an enjoyable way to learn things. It's hands-on. You can see, putting the electrodes on the person and measuring things with chemicals and running the guy on the treadmill. It's kind of an exciting, very dynamic way to generate data, information, and to evaluate it. And basically, you're creating the effects, whether it's in the lab or on the athletic field, that you see in the books, that's on the page. You're making that page, making it come off the page and come to life. You also develop important skills like project management. When you're doing a research project, you have to think about the deadlines and recruitment of your subjects and scheduling them. No research is perfect, that it goes just as planned. There are also always problems that come up. You have to learn how to solve problems. And that's an important skill for everything in life, especially if you want to go into the healthcare industry. When you meet with a patient, you're essentially looking at all their symptoms and signs and trying to diagnose and then solve their problem. It pushes you to think creatively and critically, logically. Does this make sense? Is there a theory behind it? Does this fit? With my students, as you can see, we often work as a team, helping each other out. And I mentioned at the very beginning the gut bacteria with Jared. We had a big team. I only mentioned Mahmoud Shalabi's name, but there were a number of other students that helped participate in the data collection. So all working together, communicating with each other, very important to be successful in the work world. And often the softer skills that aren't talked a lot about in college. You think about book learning, but these are really important. And these are the skills that help advance your career. You can memorize an entire book, but your advancement in the workforce will be whether you can manage your project, manage your time, think creatively, work with others, all of that. As a result of working closely with a professor, that professor is in a much better position to give you a strong reference or strong letter of recommendation. If you get straight A's in the class but never talk to the professor, going to say, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? It's often hard for them to do that. They see you got an A, but they don't know, can you manage a project? Can you think creatively? Can you solve problems? All of those things, that's what they want to know about. That's what they want to write about in a letter of recommendation. And as you go on from undergrad to grad school, PT school, medical school, pharmacy, dental school, wherever you want to go, you're going to need letters of recommendation from your professors. So this is an excellent way to get it. You also build your resume. As a result of any project students have done with me, I've had them write an abstract and present it at the very least at the UIC Research Day. They put up a poster. I think you saw Hiba in one of the pictures, had a poster presenting her work. She actually presented that at the Midwest American College of Sports Medicine meeting. So sometimes these go to regional meetings, sometimes to national meetings. Some cases, you may end up on a paper as a co-author. I mentioned Danelle Borges, who became a medical student. She was a co-author on one of the papers we published. That did a lot for her in terms of getting her foot in the door for a medical school interview, because it says you've really gone the full distance. And she could talk about that research during her interview. So that's very impressive. I have a question I want to stop real quick. How do we recommend these modifications? Does a person with a 2 to 3 hour desk job need it? So this comes back to the workstation. What's typically recommended is we get 150 minutes of exercise or movement a week at moderate levels. So that could be walking like 3 miles per hour, walking from the train to campus, okay? And you can break it up. You don't have to get, that would be 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. You don't have to do 30 all at once. Just helping people move more and do things to make them move more. Even with the 2 to 3 hour desk job, taking a break, after an hour. And actually there are sports psychologists that would recommend this too, that you work on a project for 60 to 90 minutes and no more. You stop at the end of that, be it 60 minutes or 90 minutes, you stop, you take a break, you get up, you move, you refresh your mind. Even if you were full throttle, really productive at the end of that 90 minutes, and you want to keep going, take a break. Move, walk, get a drink, have a healthy snack, and then come back and recharge and sit and work again. Some people will get up every hour, and all they may do is just stand up and sit down. Essentially, they're doing a squat at their desk. That may be all they do, and that actually may be enough. Just some movement and incorporate it and work it in. The standing desk can be effective too, even though our swing seemed to beat it in terms of calorie burning. The standing desk probably promotes you moving around more. You're more likely to walk across the room to get that book on the shelf, or to walk next door to talk to your colleague. If you're standing. If you're sitting, you may kind of be more relaxed and less likely to get up and move. So yeah, that's a good question on how we recommend it. And even in some of the classes you take, we'll talk about that. We'll address that. Kinesiology 152, the name of the class, or the name previously was Exercise as Medicine. That's the beginning exercise physiology course. We'll talk a lot about that. What does movement mean, and how do we get people to move? You'll have that in other classes as well. How do you get involved in research? During class, listen to what your professor says they're doing. They'll often talk about the research. They like to. And I mean, our professors in our department, in our college, and across the university are doing many very interesting things in terms of health, well-being, fitness, and exercise. We have people, for example, in the College of Nursing. I think there's some in the College of Pharmacy, even in engineering, that do work or related work to presenting them, and see if you can their office hours. I'd say send them an email too, but sometimes professors get a lot of emails. They might not be the best at responding. You see the student in the picture here standing at the door. You can do that. Just stand and wait for them. Figure out when that professor has office hours and stand and wait there. It requires some persistence, but you know, they come up to their office and they see you standing there. They can't avoid you. What do you want? I want to talk to you about your research. I want to get involved in it. So you capitalize on that opportunity. If you know what they're doing, that'll get them excited because you've taken the time just to find that out. You can also check our UIC website for undergrad research opportunities, because there's a lot of opportunities. There's funding that's available. There are ways that the university can help support you, even financially. Our department even offers something known as the Helen Barton Scholarship to pay a certain amount for a student to do a project over the summer. One of the first projects I talked about in this presentation with Yulani Villanueva, she got a Helen Barton Scholarship and worked with me. So there's a lot of opportunities for that. You can see what's going on campus as well. And even in your initial experience in lab classes that are in 152, 345, 352, a lot of our classes have a lab component where you start to get some hands-on experience and can get excited about things. What I would recommend is this. Ask if you can work on a project of common interest to you and that professor. In other words, find out where your passion is and find out the professor that's doing that. In other words, leverage their expertise. If you were wanting to learn how to play basketball and you came to me, a wrestler, and said, hey, can you teach me? I really want to do a great hook shot, on the basketball court. I would not be able to teach you how to do that. And you could say, well, I really want to work with you, but I don't have the expertise. I would spend the rest of my life trying to learn, and I'd be mediocre at it. So find Michael Jordan, find Bill Jackson, find the guy, the professor version of that's doing what you're interested in, and see if you can align interests and become a part of their lab, an intern, a volunteer, and in that way get the lab experience. Because then you've married your interests with their expertise, and it works best for everybody that way. I will stop here and see if we have any questions, either about the research, about getting experience, anything that you have. Take a moment or two to address that.
Craig, this is Whitney again. I just have another question. So,
Yeah.
in looking at your research and what you found working with student athletes, if I'm, an aspiring strength and conditioning coach or athletic trainer, or a lot of our students want to transition to physical therapy, how can I take some of the things that you found in your research and apply that to my patients or my student athletes? Like, what decisions would I be able to make better based on the things that you found?
Yes. So some of it might be, what to drink, some of the detailed stuff, or, what kind of practices, the movement thing with the desk. It's not so much we'll go out and buy that swing as, gee, this minor amount of movement that we're doing each day would be a good thing. So let's look at how you can do more movement and where in your daily life can you incorporate some movement or incorporate even a yoga class or some kind of fitness class, that kind of thing. And then maybe specifically what types of movement to do, what types of weightlifting versus on the treadmill versus the types of activities. So, some of the research that would come through, or even some of the classes, the 352 and 345 classes that you'll learn that. I think a lot of what you get are those softer skills, because as a healthcare person, you're scheduling patients, you're listening to their symptoms and signs, you're thinking critically and creatively about, gee, what does this sound like? What kind of problem? What resource can I go to further understand? And then understanding the anatomy, in your 251, 252 classes, the structure of the muscle and which contraction of which muscle moves this limb. Well, that's the joint I have to attack. And so then you put together a plan of a specific type of movement the person can use to help treat that area and rehab and strengthen it to get them back on their feet. So I think a lot of those softer skills are what you gain or further develop and then take with you wherever you go, in your life.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Jo. I love the advice that you gave to students about getting to know your faculty. What other advice do you have for our new students coming in?
So I think we're still offering the Kinesiology 100, which is a kind of a seminar series where different professors will come in and present. So there's a great opportunity to hear what's going on and the passions of different professors. So we have professors like Dr. Hamster Wright that's very interested in running injuries and how do you predict them, how do you take care of them, how do you prevent them. Dr. Kumlili's sports psychology and recovering, the psychological aspect of recovering from an injury. We have Dr. Baynard, who does cardiovascular fitness in women who have multiple sclerosis. And she has a student that just recently finished looking at health and fitness in breast cancer survivors. So you have a lot of people that will rotate in front of you, either in a class like that or in the classes you take. You have a professor throughout the semester who will express what they're doing. So I would say, here's a big one: ask questions in class, because of a number of things. One, when you ask a question, you've made contact with that professor. You may be sitting out in the crowd, but you made contact, you got their attention. And if they're like me, and which we're all kind of like as professors, we're interested in who that person was. What was that student that asked that question? So I'm going to go look your name up. I'm going to put a name with your face and get to know you because you've showed an interest and a passion. I advise asking questions. I really encourage students to ask questions for another reason, and that is that, here's kind of the analogy. If ever all of us on this call today were to go out and run a marathon tomorrow, probably most of us would say, I'm not doing that. That's not going to be fun. I haven't been training for it. Okay. So you have to train, and you train, and then 9 months from now or 10 months from now, we can all run the marathon because now we're fit enough to do it. Asking a question is the same way. When you're asking simple questions in a small classroom, you get the confidence and really the fitness to ask bigger, more complicated questions as you go to more advanced questions. And it's hard to just start with the big Nobel Prize winning question as your first question. You have to ask kind of simpler questions to get to that point. So you get fit in how to ask a question, and that helps you. And I often tell my students it's not about having all the right answers. Really, where you end up in life is about asking the right questions. And anybody that's gotten a Nobel Prize or becomes the CEO of a company asks the right questions to get to where they are. So if you can start sooner than later with that, just get comfortable asking that. Could all be just be a clarification question. You can continue to ask those questions. So do that, and then stop by the professor's office even during office hours. Introduce yourself. You don't have to have a question. You could just stop in and say, "Hey, I'm taking your class. I just wanted to let you know." Maybe you do have a question, or in that short conversation, a question comes up. So you ask it, you address it, or you ask the professor, "Hey, what kind of research are you doing? Do you have opportunities to have an undergrad work in your lab?" And maybe at the time they don't, but if you're a freshman, the next year or the year after they might, and they'll remember you. They'll track you down, or you stop by again. I even kid. I showed the picture of the student at the doorway, and I have a daughter and a son. I'd often tell them, "Well, lie." I would jokingly say, "Lie across the threshold of the professor's door. Make them step over you." And they look down and go, "Who are you?" And they say, "Well, I'm in your class. I'm really interested." I mean, it's like you got their attention. That's a ridiculous way and a silly way, but you got their attention, and they remember you. So I think any way you can make those positive kind of connections and show you have a passion and an interest are great, and I'd really encourage you, any of your students, to do that.
Thank you. I love the analogy with the marathon running. That is awesome, and I'm totally going to steal that from you. Thank you. Looks like we got a question in the chat. I've been admitted to the MS in kinesiology program. Any specific advice for newly admitted graduate students?
I would say similar types of advice. Try to get to know your professors sooner. Take a look at the website. Now, I may have a question back for you. With this program, are you interested? There's several ways you complete the program. It could be all coursework, 40 hours of coursework. You could do a project, or you could do a thesis. And the project and thesis aren't that different. There's a formality about doing a thesis that may not be there with a project. So what I would suggest is, for doing a project or a thesis, you're going to do research. And I would decide, earlier than later, what direction, what specialty. So is it like human performance? Okay. So if you're thinking about a project or thesis, you probably want to get involved with a professor earlier than later. Don't think of it as, well, I'll start that process my second year of my master's thesis. You want to start that earlier, because sometimes, you have to think about the proposal. If you're going to study humans, you have to get what we call IRB approval for ethical treatment of the humans. You may need some funding. So there are different ways to do that, whether it's a foundation, whether it's the government, whether it's industry. So that sometimes can take a creative process. And so the earlier you start that, and the earlier you connect with the professor that's going to be your advisor to do that, the better. As I said, research doesn't always go smooth. Sometimes there's a lot of hiccups. And so the sooner you start all that, and the more likely you finish on time, 2 years or even earlier to get it going. So your inclination is kinesiology. That's still kind of broad. So you can think of human performance. You could think of, the exercise as medicine. In other words, how do we use exercise as a treatment for patient populations? I mentioned Dr. Baynard, who's interested in cardiovascular health of individuals, their fitness level, in specific populations, so those that have had breast cancer, those that have multiple sclerosis. She has some other patient populations as well. We have professors that are interested in tripping in elderly individuals. Why do people trip? Why do they get hurt? The prognosis is often very bad. If someone falls, they fracture a hip and they go downhill pretty quickly. So studying the biomechanics of why people trip and what can be done to help strengthen them, improve their fitness, help them keep their center of balance. We have researchers that do work in prostheses. So if you have a veteran who's lost a limb and the limb has been replaced by prosthesis, how do you prevent them from tripping? We have researchers that are into wound healing and the biochemical process of how tissues heal up after they've been injured and how exercise is involved in that. So what I would say is try to early on connect with the professor you're really interested in that matches. So physical therapy, it's even possible in kinesiology to potentially work on a project in our physical therapy department. We've had students that cross over. So you might find in our physical therapy department, people are looking at the Wii game and how that is the Wii versions that have more physical activity like dancing and that, or arm movement, and how that's used to treat people who have had stroke and helps to kind of recondition the brain. There's also tripping and slipping studies that are going on in physical therapy. There's some cardiovascular, cardiac rehab studies going on in physical therapy. So you might even look at their website as well to see what kind of research is going on and if there's an opportunity to connect with some of them. But a lot of our people in biomechanics, again, a specialty area within kinesiology, might provide the same type of thing within our department. So I would look at the website and see who's doing what that's of interest to you. Anything else? Any other questions?
Craig, can you talk a little bit about, I know the fall semester is going to be a bit strange because of the ongoing COVID situation. Can you talk a little bit about how you prepare to teach classes online or in a hybrid format this fall?
Yeah, I'm probably doing a mix. So I teach statistics. So everybody here probably will be in my class at one point or another, kinesiology and nutrition, or KN 200. And that one is 40 people in it, maybe as high as 75. Probably will go with an online and a synchronous or real time. So you'll sign on through Blackboard and the lecture will come up. You'll hear my voice. It'll be just like this, live. It's recorded though as well. Sometimes students have a conflict, they're working and they can't make the lecture, so it'll be recorded so you could come back to it. We also do asynchronous homework with that class. So we have another website, my stat lab, that's set up for doing all the homework and getting the practice at solving the problems and understanding the concepts of the statistical procedures and tools we're doing. I also teach Introduction to Research, which is a smaller class. I think right now about 12 in there. We probably, depending on the classroom, might meet in person if we can get everybody spread out enough. If not, that one will probably also be on Blackboard as a synchronous or real-time study. But a lot of work is going into this with all of our classes. Anatomy, physiology is a very large class. I think that'll be online. I'm not sure if it's asynchronous, that in other words, you do it online at your own convenience, or if there'll be a scheduled time live that you'll have to be there for. One other one, lab courses. We like students to get in and get hands-on learning experiences. Those will be quite a bit different. With 152, it's all going to be online, so you'll see videotapes and that of what you normally would have done or observed in the lab. For 352, and depending on the class size, we probably will have some live labs, people meeting, doing some, running on the treadmill, that type of thing, data collection. But just be careful to keep people spread out, to wear the masks, and maybe even split our section so we have only six students at a time rather than 12 at a time in the lab room.
Great, thank you. It doesn't look like we have any other questions, but if I'm wrong, please feel free to drop them in the chat. But thank you again to Dr. Horswill for joining us today and everybody else who logged in and joined us today. We hope that we got you excited about your kinesiology classes. We're doing these every Wednesday all summer long. Next week's topic is going to be movement analysis and corrective exercise with Ms. Zared Arbel. And if you are a new student coming in this fall, don't forget there's still time to submit your intent to enroll, complete your online orientation, and then register for fall classes with Whitney and myself. So thank you again for Dr. Horswill and everybody else for attending today. We look forward to seeing you on campus